like to begin? More oranges.
Is there a difference between, you know, when Germany said it wanted to phase out its nuclear plants, and France still has theirs? So, I mean, is it kind of defeating the purpose when France next door still has mostly nuclear energy?
Well, it's an interesting debate, because the first line, when Germany took the decision to phase it out, it was not very European, because it did not inform the neighbors, even not informed, but nobody they've discussed. The French then were, in a way, saying, well, no, you have to take the decision. No, you need my nuclear power energy to import. You see? So it's a very ambiguous debate. The Germans have taken the decision without consultation of the neighbors. The others, France in this case, have been on one side upset about non-consultation, but on the other side insist, obviously, and I refer to what I said at the beginning, they have the right to determine their own energy mix. You see? So this is a very ambiguous discussion. There's no clear decision-making process. How to say, in Germany it is no nuclear, in France it is, I think it's more than 80% nuclear. This is the right of every country to define it, which then have obviously repercussions to the others. The big threat for Germany taking the decisions to cut off and taken off power stations the next day after the decision. Obviously, in the term of providing energy to industry and households, it has been a real challenge. I know they have not been needing imports from France for this purpose. But, I don't know.
Yes?
Okay, can you give some examples? 50% of renewable energy is a fantastic target. Can you give us some examples about how that's going to be achieved? Like what kind of renewable projects, where will they be, what's the extent of them?
Yeah. Well, I think if you take it from the end, if you speak about renewables, basically, but I speak under control of the colleague, he's more expert than I am. Basically, all the energy we have comes from the sun. Whatever. To take the crops, take solar energy immediately. The energy source at the end is the sun for the earth. So all things around this, you can imagine, will be used. What we see, obviously, photovoltaic, geothermy, wave. All these things will work together and will have to improve. But to give you the wind as an example, we are heavily investing in wind energy. But the wind energy, you have it mainly in the northern part, in the North Sea. So we have offshore wind parks installed in the North Sea, more and more, and really big investments. But then you have the problem to make this energy produced in the north available to the centers of economic activities, so to transmit it. The same you have it in the south. In the south you have huge parks, photovoltaic in Spain, but then it's in the middle of nowhere where they have the parks established and they need to transform to the centers of economic activity. There is a lot of activity going on. To give you one example of a project, I don't know where they are in the implementation, it is to install photovoltaic in the Sahara. And this is a huge project of, I think, 40 or 50 billion euro. And then you have the problem to transmit the energy from there to Bavaria or to Sweden. There are technical solutions, but obviously it's innovation, completely new transmission lines. Would you like to have such a transmission line in your backyard? Things like this are very important, need to be solved. So all this sort of energy is possible. But I'm always surprised here in Australia, we have the sun everywhere all the time. You have nothing. Basically, you have nothing. It's big.
It's a short comment. I think from Germany, we have a tendency to say, well, we are fascinated by the technology. Let's develop the technology, think about the economics after. Whereas here we think, well, we want energy, but it costs that and that. We don't recoup the money in 5 years' time. No, we can't do it. We'd rather import.
Yeah.
I think that's just in a nutshell.
It's true, but I would like to underline one very important point of brand. You and me are at the center of all this. If you as a consumer, you don't change your behavior. If you as somebody who takes part in elections doesn't express your opinion, and I think that is very different in Europe, especially in Germany. Public opinion or in the discussion about energy, environment, CO2, it is very, very important. And to take a decision like this, like Merkel did it after Fukushima, it was not just because she believes in the reduction of greenhouse gases. It was because there was an election about Württemberg. And from one day to the other, the county, which had always been under Christ Democrats, changed governance, and the Green Prime Minister was elected. And the next day, Merkel took the decision to phase out. Okay, so you are very important.
Yes.
Just getting back to Graham's point about that constructivist argument about mythologising, I think as Australians we can perhaps all be accused of mythologising a lot in regards to our energy use. It's a convenient excuse that we always make, and I guess the fact that we've had a ready supply of fuel for so long is another reason why we've been so reticent about engaging with new technologies and that kind of thing.
Yeah. But I think your situation from the start is different. I was not putting the emphasis on Europe is very poor in terms of natural resources. I said it implicitly, we need to import all this energy from the outside. Gas, oil, the oil import is huge, which is going to the. So in this way, you in Australia are different. You say, well, we have it all. We are self-sufficient. We have a huge country. We have a small population. So what? It's completely different. We have more than 500 million people. And we have coal. And this coal is in Spain and in Poland. In Germany it's exhausted. So we need to change.
Yes.
I understand that they were experimenting with energy generation off of the Netherlands with tide. It was in the ocean, the tidal generation.
Yes.
Is that still just an experimental phase?
No, that is what I mentioned by the sea. This tide and the wave energy. There are, I think, more than 10 pilots which are using this, and it works. It's a possibility. It is still not in the mainstream, but there is a possibility, there is a potential. I personally think geothermy is more promising.
Yes.
I'm just interested in Graham's response to putting photovoltaics at Sahara in terms of the environmental impact that would have, and how do you feel about a situation like that? Like obviously, in the end, they're sort of looking at it. This good for reducing carbon emissions, but you're looking at it from a multifaceted point of view. How do you view that?
Well, I mean, the same argument could be made here. We have large areas of desert or semi-desert. And in fact, if you look at the language used by people talking about possibly doing those sorts of things in Australia, it's always along the lines that these are non-productive areas. So that in itself is a mindset. It's a view that in fact, because I don't understand anything about that ecosystem, I don't value it at all, then it is actually unused land that I can actually occupy. So the response to your question is that you have to actually go through that question and decide whether in fact you're prepared to sacrifice that ecosystem, even though it has no economic value. And most people actually, when you pin them down on that, don't like that. Because most people actually have a view about, and it exists in all religions, about the stewardship of the planet. And even for non-religious people, there is this very strong feeling that they should leave things in good shape when they leave. So my first response is that I think that we will have to make compromises. We're already doing it, and a lot of those compromises, like the combustion of the coal reserves, are not sustainable. And we will have to make compromises about using energy, solar energy. The second general point, of course, is the one that has been mentioned, and that is that these places are not near where you want the energy. And so one of the technological discussions that's quite strong at the moment is transferring the energy via DC rather than alternating current, which is a lot more efficient, and you lose a lot less energy over a long period, a long distance. And so in the northwest of Scotland, for example, the wind farms out in the ocean there, most of those will only be really viable economically if in fact the power is delivered back to where it's needed through DC connections. But this is a whole new area. As has been pointed out, huge investments required. And this strategicness, it isn't about return in 5 years. It's a generational thing that we actually have to make a change.
Yes.
Just the last one, just to draw it back into the education system. You've talked about top-down approaches governments are making a unilateral decision, and you said, as a citizen, you can activate that change from bottom up so that institutions and organisations make sustainability a priority. What comment do you have to make? But that sort of understanding for a citizen comes from education, and not just education once they've left school, but within school. How does the EU, and clearly it's such it's made up of lots of different countries, how does the EU facilitate that? Or what sorts of educational measures are in place so that its citizens are actually aware of the importance of environmental sustainability, so that they can, as citizens, when they are able to vote, because my students cannot vote, but I'm sure they can influence their parents at home in some way. Do you know what I mean? So how does that happen?
Yeah.
So maybe it's too big a question, but I'm quite interested in an educational system and how it approaches it. The two go hand in hand. You can't become an active citizen until you understand why you need to be an active citizen.
Yes. Well, if you address this question to me as EU, I can tell you this is very much what we call decentralized. We have, even in Germany, the educational system, it is not a federal task. It's a task of the counties. Each country is responsible, even for universities. And I'm thinking here in Australia it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So you have the same question, but we on EU level, we then try to promote this sort of thinking through financing of pilot projects, through providing material, things like this. But we are not able to determine the content of teaching. That is completely out of our hands. And there, your role is important. But I think it is hard really something which has to happen in the schools, but it's a much larger process. The civil society must become aware of the problems Graham was very, very precisely describing. And from there, to create an activity which will lead to influencing elections. So the EU, again, we are quite weak. We are only providing help, giving information, providing material, but we are not able, in terms of law, to prescribe, determine what you have to say in the teaching.
Yes.
I was just musing on this concept of putting solar panels in the desert, and I do understand the importance of the ecology of the deserts, and that there would certainly be an impact if you did that. But then I'm also thinking about, what about the impact of mining? And much of our mining in Australia takes place in deserts where an ecosystem is virtually totally destroyed. And I think if you look in terms of the sustainability in the long term, and we're talking about long-term strategies and goals, surely maybe putting solar cells in a desert and the economic return and the sustainability of that is surely better than flogging off our iron ore to China.
I agree, but there's another way of looking at it, and that is that at the moment, with the large-scale wind generators that are available, if you're in the right place and there's wind, like the North Sea, but over an area, you actually generate more energy per unit area than you do from solar collectors. And you can have stuff growing underneath them.
But isn't that a technology thing? Won't technology get better?
Yeah, but look, that's right. I mean, all my assumptions are photovoltaics that collect at 10% efficiency. So that will probably improve. Although there are theoretical limits that you can't go beyond, which is less than 50%. So you need to consider that. But, these are all trade-offs that you have to consider in these things. Geothermal, I think we've played around with that. We're well placed in Victoria and South Australia, particularly South Australia for geothermal. Other states not so well placed. But the main hurdle for geothermal is that the power lines are not near there. And the companies that are ready to invest in building the plants are not ready to invest in the connections of those plants to the grid. And they're looking for government support. Now, I would think, if you think strategically, that that's exactly what a government should do. Is to think, well, in the longer term, this is going to benefit a huge number of people. But that's been an impasse at the moment in South Australia, and it will be here if people get to that point in Victoria.
Haven't they increased prices because they're putting money in better equipment?
Into infrastructure. They argue that, and I think in part that's correct. Well, you may not be familiar with this, but the interesting thing in Australia is electricity demand or usage consumption in the last 3 years has not gone up for the first time ever. It's always been increasing. And there are a number of, we don't know exactly why that is, but there are a number of reasons. One is that a lot of people, some of you maybe in this room, have now got photovoltaics on their roofs. And you wouldn't have done that entirely on economic grounds. It's a bit marginal. We actually had the process of improving insulation because our houses are very, compared to Germany, because of a ridiculous lack of insulation. We've done that. People are more aware, but price has gone up, and that's driven behaviour. So there's all these things that are happening. So in electricity demand, we've actually plateaued at this stage. One can only hope that in fact it will now start to come down.
It's gone up the last 2 weeks because of the...
Oh, it would, and part of the reason why it could be stable, more stable the last 2 years has been because of the rainfall and low temperature. Absolutely right.
Anyway, perhaps make this the last question and then we'll get ourselves organised for the rest of the afternoon.
I have a question about the project in the Sahara Desert.
is it in any way connected to the European development policy? What do the countries on whose territory this is all based, what do they get out of this? Do they?
Jobs.
Jobs, skills, knowledge, energy perhaps?
Yes, but as far as I know, that is basically it's a very commercial project. It is not linked to development aid. And I'm pretty sure that it is accompanied by European Union and national diplomacy, but it's not the first aim, it's not development aid. It is to satisfy the energy needs.
Or is there a danger that in the future, 10 years from now, it will be another colonialist project and Europeans will be accused of?
I didn't think that word was mentioned.
But I think that is what you put there is the heart of the international policy question. As I mentioned, the competition for energy will increase. You saw the figures, 2/3 of the energy demand will be coming from Asia. How this will be thought, it will be putting a lot of constraints and a lot of difficulties on everybody, especially on diplomacy, external policies, and so on. I think energy has already been the origin of a lot of wars. But also, and there I come back to the European Union, the energy was at the beginning of the creation of the European Union. When we put coal and steel together between France and Germany, was the origin that we could come to peace. So in the Sahara, or say the pipeline through Turkey and then going to Azerbaijan, obviously this is a strategic project, and if you cut this line somehow, it can lead to war. So I think we will face new challenges. Very different.
Thanks, Edgar. One last comment from.
I just wanted to follow up on the comment about the education, the role of educators, because to my way of thinking, there are two ways you can look at this. If educators actually convey to the students the way the world is as perceived now, then that is in danger of the persistence of the myths. Now, the very fact that you guys are here suggests that you don't want to do that. You want to learn, and you want to learn more about the way the world might be and how it might be different from the past, and that's pretty good. So that's the first point. Education can reinforce myths, or it can actually challenge them. And that's the second point is that there is, of course, a very strong movement towards education being coupled to training for jobs. And that, I think, is a bit dangerous, because certainly it's part of the reason for educating people to do work, useful work. But it also is got to be about people thinking out of the box about the world, the way the world might be, and the jobs that might exist if the world is different. And I think that, again, is a very strong role for educators.
That, again, seems to be a very good note on which we draw together the threads of this session and say thank you very much indeed to our two presenters.